Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about visuals in the art room. The art room is a place where a lot of different learners engage, and you know this, you often have more room to move, more movement, lots of different supplies happening, and visuals become an imperative way for you to constantly be communicating with your students without having to explain and re-explain things verbally over and over again. There are three kinds of visuals that need to accompany any lesson plan that you write. If you hit all three categories of visuals that we're about to talk about, then you can pretty much be sure that there's support and references for students to work with, no matter where they're at in a project. Visuals in this way are also really important differentiation tools because they're going to help kids who are moving a little faster keep going in the lesson if they get stuck. They serve as reminders for kids who aren't sure what the next step in a process is. They also provide access points. So kids, if they need to read something because they don't process auditory information as well, or if they need to revisit something, you can make videos and give them backup and repetition. The first category of visual that you need in your classroom are inspirational visuals. These visuals are meant to inspire and motivate students about a process or an artist or a big idea. They really help students build that Rolodex in their head of what materials are capable of and what the potential for a particular theme is, maybe, right? If we look at, you have an inspirational visual about uh, 5 artists that work with trees, but in vastly different ways, kids start to be able to see that there's more than one way to do something, right? Multiples in inspirational visuals become important because, again, we're looking to expose students to the maximum potential of something. And this also limits that, let me just copy what's in front of me when they see multiple options. The visual here in this slide is of lots of different ways to work with and tie rope, right? So you really see all the ways we can manipulate something as simple as cording, paracord, or rope. Visuals show the potential of a medium, right? Kids might think, oh, it's just paper or cardboard, but look what cool stuff we can do with it, right? So again, you're trying to kind of blow open their brains, help them see beyond the boundaries of their current experience and your classroom and what they're currently capable of making to see what artists can really do with that particular medium. Inspirational visuals also show how artists are using a material and have used a medium in their work, right? So this is, again, an inspirational visual about cardboard. These really cool three-dimensional hanging sculptures are rounds of cardboard with holes drilled down the center that have been turned into lengths of rope and cording that can all be twisted back on themselves. Who knew that we could do that with cardboard, right? So again, inspirational visuals are about showing students what is possible with something. Okay. Inspirational visuals also show the work of artists, right? So again, that mental Rolodex, you and I and other college art students with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, we've seen a lot of art. We've taken a lot of art history. We've been to galleries and shows. We're constantly looking at art and finding it all around us. So we have a very deep mental Rolodex to draw on when we're trying to brainstorm. The kids are still building that. And as teachers, it's our responsibility to help them start building that mental Rolodex, right? So for example, this inspirational visual shows a lot of linocut and reduction color cuts. And kids can start to see things like the range of topics that can be successfully done in this material. They can see what noise is. They can see what happens when you layer colors, right? We're starting to get a sense of, oh, this is what linocut is, and this is what it can do, right? How cool is that? The second category of visuals that you have to think about making are conceptual or instructional visuals. These visuals explain ideas and concepts that can be used across media, right? So principles of design, big ideas, the studio habits of mind, anything that can be used across materials, right? So emphasis is a principle of design that we can use and focus on whether or not we're painting or drawing or sculpting. Right, so these visuals are not going to cover things like stages of clay, right? Because stages of clay is particular to a clay medium. So you might make visuals about the differences between background, middle ground, and foreground, or how to make depth in an image using overlapping or diminishing size. You might talk about line or color or shape. You might explain what impressionism is. You might explain all the different parts of a paintbrush, right? You might explain, right, these things that they need across medium. Anything that's needed across a medium is a concept, right? What is a concept they need to understand and apply in order to be successful with a particular material or with a particular composition? Okay, so procedural visuals in turn, and sort of opposite, are the third category. They illustrate technical hands-on art making processes, right? So this is where you make visuals that show students how composition works. So for example, in this slide, you can explain how thumbnails lead an artist to making a better composition, or you can show how dabbing and testing paint colors on a surface lets you get a better sense of what they're going to look like in a particular painting. You can show kids how to use scissors, how to use an X-Acto knife, how to clean their water brush, how to center clay on a wheel, how to make a pinch pot, right? This is the procedural how-tos that are like DIY videos. Okay. Procedural visuals help students remember processes and make materials decisions. So, right, this chart looks, which glue should I use? And it's a chart that's going to say, well, what are you trying to glue together? And therefore, what glue can I use for it, right? This visual might show up at a tab station. So when students are working with 3D materials and they're trying to think through, I need to make them stick together, which one do I use? Or you might even have students help you make this chart, right? And this is where sometimes visuals get constructed by the kids, right? Or you construct them as a class, as an exploration and a lesson. All right, here are a bunch of glues. Let's learn all about glues and how not to glue our fingers together with super glue, right? And you put a bunch of materials out and you have the kids kind of systematically experiment and, right, studio habit of mind, stretch and explore, figure out which glues work with which materials, right? This would give an activity like this where you produce this visual with the kids each year would really build a lot of their foundational knowledge of glues. They'd get to explore them, that you'd get to cover all the safety information, right? Like, what do we do if we get burned by the hot glue? Hey, you use fingernail polish to unstick skin that's stuck with super glue. Rubber cement really shouldn't be used too much because it's actually kind of toxic, right? But then, hey, so is epoxy. So high school only, right? But you can see both the value of having this kind of chart in your classroom and also the value of turning a lesson into making this chart in your classroom. So keep that in mind. You can always have the kids help you make visuals as well. You need one of each of these categories. You need in every single lesson plan. So you need one inspirational visual in every single lesson plan, one conceptual visual in every single lesson plan, and one procedural visual in every single lesson plan. Now, that's not to say you have to make brand new visuals for every single lesson plan. You can use something that you've already made and is in your arsenal, right? Especially in a unit plan, you might make an awesome inspirational visual about the 3 artists that are your focus artists for that unit, and then you might have access to it for the entire unit. So you would relist that visual every single day. And sure, you could also add other inspirational visuals as needed as you go along. So you can have as many visuals as you want around, but you must have at least one in each category because visuals help students help themselves, right? You don't want to feel like a chicken with its head cut off or a broken record player when the students are going, what's the next step in the process, right? If you have a handout, it's a procedural visual that you had them glue in their sketchbook, or you have it as a slide up on the wall on your smart board or on your projection screen, students can help themselves. They aren't going to be as reliant on you every step of the way. They can help themselves. It builds independence, it builds resilience, it builds critical reflection. Right. Visuals also build in differentiation for diverse learners. So again, if somebody's moving a little faster than the class, they can see what's next, right? A lot of teachers will pre-record demos for next steps in a project, especially in a class where every kid has a Chromebook or an iPad, right? You can make some extension activities or some next step videos for kids that are going to need to work ahead. Again, the same videos can work in reverse for a student that's a little behind or missed a class, right? They can sit down and watch a video that you've made or look at the past handouts to see what was happening. And again, and on a day-to-day basis, right? One of the most important things is that good visuals keep you from feeling like a broken record. Anytime you're saying something over and over and over again to every kid, right? everybody's asking, how do I cut a curvy shape with scissors? It's time to reteach it, and it's time for a visual, right? So when you're getting frustrated because you have said something over and over and over again, don't blame the kiddos, right? Look to your pedagogy. What do you need to reteach, and how can you provide a visual that they can reference for themselves? Because again, the goal of visuals is to help students help themselves and be a little bit more self-reliant so they don't need you every single breath of every single class. So how do you make a good visual? In no particular order, these are some principles that you need to make good visuals. You need to put time and care into making well-crafted visuals that you will use over and over again. Think about it. If you're going to make one, make it forever that will last the rest of your career, or at least, 4 or 5 years. So you don't have to make quite so many visuals all of the time. Remember that visuals are a part of how you communicate with students, so they have to be neat and organized and in clean print so that kids of all ages can read them. They need to be visual and have, physical information about supplies, but also words and vocabulary, so you're accommodating for your English language learners and your young readers, right? That's literacy integration. Visuals are also a way that we communicate in very subtle ways with people who come in the art room that, hey, we're a really accomplished visual artist and we have our shit together, right? So if you walk into a room and the visuals are falling apart and are unappealing and unattractive, people are going to wonder why you're the art teacher, right? So take some time to make visuals now. This beautiful visual that you see here is a set of different stitching samplers for embroidery. In some states, embroidery is required every year in elementary school at some point. I know in Virginia in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they have to learn different kinds of embroidery. Some is even as young as 1st or 2nd grade, right? You stitch on burlap and help build those fine motor skills that assist with writing and drawing and shading later on. But somebody took the time to show, again, this is also an inspirational visual, right, of all of these different kinds of stitches and what they look like in different colors. And once you have these, man, you're done. You just pull them out every year and put them up, and they're beautiful. They're not going anywhere. Okay, that said, you can't overcomplicate visuals, right? Sometimes simple is better. Take a look at this visual, right? Horizontal and vertical are words we're trying to teach in elementary school all the time, right? If we talk about folding paper, you'll often hear teachers say, let's do a hot dog fold, right? It's an up and down fold that's more narrow, right? It's along a vertical, and it's okay to say hot dog fold. That's a good kid-friendly set of languages that uses a metaphor that, at least in the US, most kids are going to know. But it's only as good as our teaching of the real vocabulary also is. So if you're teaching a kid to fold a piece of paper hot dog style, you need to say, all right, we're folding a piece of paper hot dog style. That means we're folding it vertically. And you want to alternate your verbiage back and forth between the familiar kid-friendly explanation and the real word. But this teacher has taken some vinyl and some sticky vinyl and also added the words in an obvious place in the classroom. So when the kids are lined up at the door every day, she's reinforcing vertical and horizontal, right? Because they line up to leave the classroom every day. Makes a lot of sense, uses what's available. So keep it simple. Sometimes that packs a lot of punch. Effective doesn't have to be complicated. So very similarly to, keep it simple, try to get something down to its most basic, especially for young children, right? So often teachers find that they feel like a broken record telling kids to draw light, to not press so hard, because then kids can't erase their marks, and then the kids get frustrated because they can't change their drawing when we have them draw on pencil first, even if we're going over it with marker or Sharpie or ink or paint later. So many teachers have a visual like this: draw light until you've got it right? So again, onomatopoeia, rhyming words, things that are kid-friendly, help kids remember a process, an important process that applies not just one particular medium like graphite, but kind of to all processes in the art room. Draw light until you get it right? And kids need practice with pressure control, drawing light versus drawing dark with a pencil. And they need a lot of reminders for that. So making a simple and uncomplicated visual like this, right, that uses, the pencil as a background helps the kids immediately go, oh yeah, with my pencil, I'm going to draw light till I get it right, right? And it becomes something that they kind of, you'll hear kids say out loud to themselves in their verbal self-talk as they remind themselves to do these things. This video isn't going to work here, but it's not clicking in. But typically a principle that you have is that I recommend that you only use one digital visual per lesson plan. Okay, and here's why I typically say that. When you make all your visuals as PowerPoint slides, you can only have one slide up at a time on the screen. So if all of your categories of visuals for this unit plan are on PowerPoint slides, then that means you constantly have to run back and forth to the teacher desk and toggle back and forth between the slides, right? That gets cumbersome and doesn't always work. But if you make a mixture of digital visuals, right, videos or slides or PowerPoints or Google Slides, right, or demo videos, you can have one up, but then the kids will still have posters to look at or handouts to look at or table tents to look at. Now, if you're teaching online, clearly that's not going to work, right? If you're teaching online or working in a digital and synchronous environment, then all of your visuals will be digital, and it's good to keep them all on a choice board or to make sure the kids have a YouTube channel that they can toggle back and forth between. Okay, but if you're in an analog classroom and you're teaching live, I don't recommend that you make more than one or maybe two of your visuals digital, because unless every kid has a device, right? Because then you can point to them, right? You can be at the blue table talking to Micah about her project, and Nathaniel at the yellow table is going to say, what do I do next? And you're going to say, you take a look at the poster on the wall, go read it for me. And he can have a minute to get up and go read the poster, or you can tell him to check out his procedure list in his sketchbook because he just glued in your handout, right? So again, you need multiple access points to your visuals. Okay. Remember that you can reuse visuals in a lesson and a unit. So again, if you've made an inspirational visual that you're using on day one of a unit, keep it up the entire unit. List it every single day. Remember also that a visual like this, right? I showed this to you when we were talking about inspirational visuals, right? This inspirational visual can also later be used as a conceptual visual, right? So if you have taken a reduction or linocut relief printmaking class, you know that noise is an important concept in linocut, right? And we see noise on the tree trunk with all the birds in the background where there's little almost like hatch marks of the black, right? We see noise in the cardboard holograph of the dog, right? Some of that cardboard in the background that's picking up just a little bit of ink. That's visual noise. We see a little visual noise in this picture of I'm not sure if it's a cicada or a beetle. It's probably a cicada, but you can see the scrapings, right, where not all of the linoleum or safety cut was removed, and there's just little traces that are picking up little bits of ink. That's called noise, right? And this visual is both an inspirational visual about the potential for linocut, but you can also pull it back up on another day and show it to the kids and have them look at the images and find bits of noise. Or you could take what was a big PowerPoint slide, and you can take each of these individual images and print them off and laminate them. So each table in your classroom gets one of these images, and you hand them the big laminated picture. It could be like 11 by 14, and you have them with a dry erase marker circle examples of noise, right? So then you've got an interactive, active participation strategy going with your visual as well. So don't forget, if you're going to do it once, try to make it multi-purpose, right? And it's okay to call this visual inspirational on one day and conceptual on another. It depends on how you're using it, how you're going to apply it in your unit plan. Reference stuff the kids know in your visuals is kind of the next principle for making these, right? When you're teaching complex concepts or new concepts, this is where you've got to know your students, and you've got to know pop culture and visual culture a little bit and think, okay, how do I make this accessible, right? It's like that hot dog fold or hamburger fold is a vertical fold and a horizontal fold. Okay, again, you still have to teach the real vocabulary, but you're going to work with the notion that we start where students are at in order to help them go where they're not, right? So think about that a minute. How do we start where students are at to help them go where they're not? Okay, so this visual, it's actually a really long infographic. The right side is meant to be just under the left side, so you can read it entirely vertically. It doesn't really fit on the slide. But this is about Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And the hero's journey is this notion, if you read up at the top, right, that the hero ventures forth from the common world into the world of supernatural wonder. And there are fabulous forces are encountered, and the hero wins a decisive victory. And the hero comes back to the common world with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man, right? This is the classic sort of hero's journey. And in the hero's journey, in Joseph Campbell's analysis of the hero's journey as it shows up in movies and mythology and fiction, there are different characters, right? There's a hero and a sidekick and a mentor and a gentle giant and a comic duo and a villain in the villain's army, right? And here, of course, the visual is using Legos, one thing very popular with kids, and two, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Star Wars. So you don't get much more common, pervasive visual culture than Harry Potter and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, right? So you can see how the hero's journey is set up in multiple narratives, and we get to compare and contrast, right? So this is a visual that really uses what kids know to help them see something and reframe something in a different way. Okay, another example of this is just, making it a little funny using a pop culture reference, right? If you're trying to teach kids that human beings are 7.5 heads tall, right? Then what happens if you put a picture of Han Solo next to it? Like, is your person, 7.5 Han Solo heads tall? Really? And sometimes these kinds of things, become a common language in your classroom, right? So think about my use of sexy paragraphs, right? Sexy is an acronym. It's funny. You can tell my high school teacher was, making a bunch of high schoolers giggle, when he came up with that acronym. But I don't have to spend a lot of time explaining to you why your paragraph is breaking down when I'm reading it, because I can say, it's not a sexy paragraph. Go check your E, or your I doesn't match your S, or your example doesn't make much sense. And you know what to go fix, right? I don't have to belabor every single point because I've taught you a way to think about that allows us to communicate effectively to each other. So sometimes, when you make a joke or you reference something and you build some internal language in your classroom, that really helps kids understand and for you to quickly communicate with them. Right. Make visuals, right? Sometimes we're really tempted. We're doing a unit about butterflies. So we make all our visuals about butterflies. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense because then it sort of feels weird to pull those butterfly visuals out when you're talking about, you know, Gothic architecture, right? So make visuals a little generic, right, so that you can use them across your curriculum and across your program. Right, if you're teaching 1 point perspective for the first time to fifth or sixth graders, don't make it exactly about what their project is about, right? Make something like this, or make a couple multiples, or make, if you're building buildings with them or cityscapes with them, don't get so specific to the project that you can't use the visual over and over again. Again, you're going to be making a lot of visuals in the next 5 years of your life, but make them so that you can use them forever. Okay. You can also think about mobility and temporality with your visuals, right? Make visuals that can be rearranged, right? These visuals were made by a teacher who uses them with young children to kind of lay out what's going to happen in the class. First, we're going to put our name on the paper, then we're going to color, then we're going to cut, then we're going to glue, right? And these things, have sticky tape on the back or a magnetic, and they can be rearranged. You might come in the next class and see that we're going to put our name in our paper, and then we're going to cut and glue, and then we're going to paint, right? So sometimes your visuals can be mobile. Don't be afraid to think outside the box on that. Consider the power of counter examples in a visual, right? Sometimes showing students where common errors happen and common mistakes show up really helps kids, narrow in and solidify their knowledge about something. It's not enough to make a visual about the proper proportions of a face, but show kids what happens when common mistakes are made, right? So this visual is probably an ad from a magazine that the teacher has drawn on top of, and is very, very visually and effectively showing, the kids where the most common mistakes are, right? kids often put the eyes way above the halfway mark. It takes them, something a little jarring like this to go, oh, the eyes really are halfway down. Like we don't initially think that. Or we do the pig nostrils, or, kids always want to draw in every single eyelash, even when you're far away from the eyes, right? Whereas a heavier line, in a certain shape, sort of like cat's eye eyeliner, can indicate that there are eyelashes, right? So counter examples are so important. And really, this is where anytime you're working with materials, and I'm always, always going to encourage you, even if you never show the kids the example, right? And often we don't show the kids your example, you should still make an example of the project using the materials that the kids are going to use. And you should take pictures or leave parts of them unfinished so that you have things to hold up. Here, I made a mistake. Look, I started a painting and it didn't quite work because my greens got muddy, or I wanted to overlap something, but I'm using watercolor and it's hard to do that once the background's in, right? Because we can see through watercolor, right? So purposely make mistakes in partially finished examples to use as visuals. It'll really help the kids understand what it is that you're talking about. Okay? Don't be afraid to employ metaphor to explain concepts, right? This really adorable color family portraits makes it really easy to understand, what monochromatic colors look like in everyday classroom material choices, right? It's not just theoretical on a color wheel. It's like, hey, here are all the markers we have in our room that are monochromatic, or that are primary or secondary or warm or cool, right? So don't be afraid to pull in metaphor and storytelling to help the kids understand ideas. Don't be afraid to make the visual with the class and then document it, right? So just like the glue chart, this particular visual is actually from a STEAM class. They had blow up planets and they were trying to figure out how far away they are all from the sun. And the kids had to do some math and figure it out. And they measured them with toilet paper. All the way down the hallway of the school, and took pictures of it. And then they did other things later on in class with it. But, just this kind of a visual, this is an activity that made something visual, that once it's documented becomes a recurring visual that can be used as a reference. So don't be afraid to think through, how can the kids make their own visuals? You would, of course, know what they're going to look like when they're done, because it's a guided practice or a sample or instruction sheet. But don't be afraid to make them interactive. Okay. Don't be afraid to combine image and text, right? This is from a wood shop class, right? Where someone has taken all the different kinds of wood and they've changed them, right? Stained then sanded, painted turquoise and sanded, left natural, right? And all that person has done is write on top of it, so that, when you go up to touch the board and look at the boards and see what's happening with the boards, and can easily and quickly compare and contrast what will happen to this wood if I leave it natural, if I paint it gray and then I sand it, if I stain it dark walnut. You're also going to see this person, pointing out vocabulary, like there's an arrow on the bottom right that says, this is a knot, right? So you're teaching, here's the wood grain. Like I think I would add something, like here, this is the direction of the wood grain, right? This is a knot. You could even make one that has like, this is walnut, this is pine, this is oak, right? So think about how you could do this with different kinds of paper, right? If you have a tab drawing station, can you make on a paper ring of some kind, samples of all the papers available, right? That the kids can kind of look through and touch to see what kind of paper they want to use, or maybe ask you for, right? That's a good way to control your stockpile of paper, right? Here's a sample book. Tell me what you need, right? Come propose your project to me and I'll help you get paper out of the cabinet, right? So don't be afraid to create samples and booklets and visuals that show kids all of the materials that may be available to them, and combine images with text. Okay. Be kid friendly. This teacher added labels to her glue bottles, right? One of the bane of elementary school art teacher existence is the caps on the Elmer's glue bottles, right? The kids don't close them properly, then they get clogged, and then the kids try to solve it themselves by taking their scissors and jamming it, down the front of the orange cap, when what really needs to happen is they need to bring it to you so you can take the cap off the bottle and insert like a yarn needle from the inside to clear the clog, right? Because once they jam a big hole with their scissors into the top, they never close again and the glue bottle's kind of dead, right? So you can see reminders on here like wipe my cap clean, twist my orange cap, right? So the materials themselves are communicating with the kids about how to care for them, right? And then the other two glue bottles are saying dot dot not a lot, right? That's something we say a lot with the Elmer's glue, because of course the kids love to just turn it over like it's ketchup and go right all over their paper. And if it's a really loose fibered paper like construction paper, of course it buckles and has those puddles and ripples in it as the glue dries, and we don't always want that. So these are clearly things that the teacher found herself saying all of the time. So she solved it by adding labels to every glue bottle in the room. A lot of upfront work, but I guarantee that saved her mental stress and anxiety and made her feel less like a broken record, right? We get worn down when we feel like a broken record. Even though the kid in fourth block at the end of the day hasn't heard you say that yet, you've been saying it 60 times today and you're sick of it, and you might lose your cool a little bit with that last kid, even though they're going, why are you upset? I just asked a question, right? So again, this is where visuals serve multiple classroom management and pedagogical and differentiation purposes, and they just help keep you sane. Make visuals, speaking of classroom management or classroom choreography, make visuals part of your classroom management, right? So here not all visuals are a poster, right? You can make visuals that are handouts for your middle schooler sketchbooks that they keep in your classroom. You can make them interactive, so it's a handout that shows a procedure and also has them practice it. You may also want visuals that aren't across the room, right? If it's a really big room or that you realize your poster isn't big enough, you may want the visual at every single table so that 3 or 4 kids can share the visual. Two really cost-effective ways to do that. On the left here, you see somebody's taken a file folder and a plastic slide sleeve, and she's got visuals that slide in on today's procedure, right? So that students can reference it anytime they need it. And then you can see how easy it would be to change that out for different classes, right? Or even to have a couple sets of these for your different tables, and then to have a couple sets around so you can just change them out if you're going from a quick switch from kindergarten to 5th grade. On the right, you see a visual made from a clipboard, probably epoxied to a bookend. That means it stands upright. And again, the sheets, you could pre-stack the sheets at the beginning of the day, right, for different classes, and you can put the class at the top. And then as the class goes by or exits the room, or your cart rolls down the hallway, you just pull the top sheet off and put it in a file folder that's or a bin on your cart, and the visual's ready to go for the next class, right? So these are fast and efficient. I also once knew an art on a cart teacher who used those digital picture frames, right? I would imagine the technology has changed a lot in the last 8 years, but she used to just, use a USB drive, and she had a digital picture frame per table, and she would load her presentation on a rotating, like just a constant rotation setting on the digital picture frame, so that it would rotate all the way through each step, and then she just put them on each table and the kids could follow along that way. So there's really high-tech ways to do this and really low-tech ways to do this. And don't think that everything has to be high-tech. Sometimes these solutions, these low-tech solutions, are the most effective. Okay? Don't forget to take photos as you make class examples, right? So even if you're not going to show the kids a finished example, it's still going to help you to make examples to work through what you will say in your demonstration and to think through the sequencing of your lesson plan. And this person really remembered to take pictures of what's going on as they were figuring out how to make a single sheet of paper zine, right? That then can become a handout, right? So take photos as you're going along, so that you can see through easy ways to make visuals. So if you just make a project and then make all your visuals, it's not as an effective use of your time as taking photos and documenting what you're doing in your own explorations when you're prepping to help make a totally awesome visual later on, right? So again, a little upfront work means more effective time management later on. All right, so what are the decision-making points you have to think about when you're going to make a visual? Think through use and need, right? Both of these visuals in this slide are about texture. They're both very effective visuals, but one makes a better poster and one makes a better handout. Which one do you think is the poster? If you said the one on the left, you're right, and it's because the images are bigger and there are fewer words. If you're going to put a poster on the wall, it's got to be big and it can't be super text heavy. Whereas the one on the right, if you made that a poster, man, it better be 4 feet by 5 feet or no one's going to be able to read it. The one on the right makes a better handout that kids could put in their art folder or glue into their sketchbook as a reference, right? So you've got to think, do I want my visual to be a poster that the whole group looks at or a handout that I can give to each kid? You also want to think, again, do I make one big visual work or should I make multiples when I'm making my visuals? So, classic thing is, glazed tiles and glazed samples in your classroom. The one on the left is the glazing tiles that are all on one wall in a ceramics classroom. The one on the right, the teacher had 6 or 7 of, one for each table, so that as the kids are working, they could look at them and decide what color they want. And then they could go over to the station, or a teacher or a teacher's aide could deliver the color to them, right? So this is the one on the right. There are multiples of them and they're smaller. So you got to think, what makes more sense? Do I need one big one for the class or multiples for a group? You also want to think through the lesson, right? Can you pair the creation of a visual with a guided practice? Again, how can you get kids to make visuals too? You might still want to make one, right? If you're teaching a drawing class, this is a really great visual of what the marks of every single pen looks like. And as somebody who is a drawer or painter who really likes pens and paper and things, this one makes my heart sing a little bit. But you got to think, okay, even if I make one of these, shouldn't the kids have to do this too? Right? If I'm opening up a drawing station in my tab classroom, or I'm teaching an advanced drawing class in high school, shouldn't the kids, if I'm just going to let them go and get what they need and use a variety of mark making tools in my class, or have them check out multiple mark making tools, shouldn't they have a reference page where they've experimented with every single one of them and thought through the pros and cons? Probably a good idea. So, a sketchbook assignment or a page where kids have to experiment, right? Again, habit of mind, stretch and explore, envision possibilities, right? Develop craft, right? We're hitting multiple studio habits of mind when we make the kids make a version of a bigger visual that we've got, or engage in a practice that becomes a visual that they themselves reference later. Okay, if you're going to hand make your visuals, I have some tips for you. The first, if you're making a poster, don't try to explain more than one concept or step at a time. Use big letters, 3 inches high, at least. And I'm not kidding when I say 3 inches high, right? If you're sitting at the front of the art ed room, really close to the computer desk, and there's a visual that's on Steve's office door, if those letters aren't 3 inches high, you're going to be squinting and trying to read it. And you're a grown-up who knows how to read, right? Whereas your classroom is going to be hopefully as big as our art ed room, but you're going to have beginning readers and emerging readers. So they need big letters that are clear and simple, and they need to be able to see those from all the way across the room. Okay, and the thing about one concept, that's what lets you make the letters 3 inches high, right? I often have a student want to make a visual about the stages of clay for their classroom, and greenware, leather hard, bone dry, bisque, and they want to put all 5 of those or 4 of those, on one poster. Make one poster for each of those and put them in a row on the wall, right? One at a time. Keep it big. Now, think through form and layout, right? Canva is a great free app if you're not used to InDesign that you can make some really great handouts on. You can always take a Google slide to make a good handout with, because you can move the text boxes all over the place. Google Drawing is also going to let you make good handouts quickly. That's not to say you can't necessarily do some things that have some handwriting, right? These two are very, very neat handwriting, but if your handwriting's not great, don't go there. Make the text visual and then print it off and draw on top of it if you need a hand-drawn element, right? And you might. But remember, too, that your emerging readers, right? If you're an elementary school teacher, even if you're a middle school teacher, your kids are going to be reading anywhere from, beginning readers, emerging readers, or I used to have 8th graders that were only reading on a 4th or 5th grade level. So you can't be writing in cursive and you can't be writing, in some flowy calligraphic script. You've got to use simple, clear printing so that all levels of readers can start accessing your visuals. Now, I do recommend that you find very digital ways to add text to your visuals, right? Print it out, make a poster and have media services print off your poster. Keep the words very, very simple. If you're going to hand-drawn letters, then you need to get a yardstick. You need to grid them out in pencil first, before you ever make any marks in, Sharpie. Okay. Think through contrast and composition, right? This is one of the, I think, cutest sort of ideas for a visual I've seen, but this visual drives me nuts. So let's take a look at this visual for a minute. Weight of great coloring, right? So the teacher's trying to think through, when we're learning to color and we're learning to control our mark making in elementary school with crayons, right? Adding texture, color blending, right? Doing really clean shading makes more visual weight. It makes things feel solid and finished, right? Versus coloring in multiple directions and scribbling outside the lines, unless we're teaching scribbling techniques as a drawing, which is not, out of the way or out of our realm as art teachers, right? These marks on the right feel less visually heavy, right? Now, here's my problem though, okay? Don't be a hypocrite when you make your visuals. Because what has this teacher done in the background with the tan color of her background? She has done the very thing she has told the kids not to do. She has scribbled. Like, look next to color blending, right underneath the word color blending, you can see her own scribbly zigzag line, right? Don't be a hypocrite, right? The background of this should be solid, right? It needs to, I don't care if it's white, I don't care if it's on tinted paper, right, to create some good contrast, but the teacher has not helped, Tabitha Seton has not helped herself by accidentally being a hypocrite in her background, right? Practice what you preach. We also can't read the title, right? The fonts got a little too crazy. They look a little Wild West with the color scheme they've got going on, and there's not enough contrast from the background for us to read it easily from a distance. And again, that word weight would be very hard for a young reader to read. So keep it simple. Okay. There it is. Practice what you preach. Don't do what you just told the kids not to do. They pick up on that. This visual is done on graph paper. It's handmade. It's something that can be photocopied to show the kids how to make and shape paper to roll into paper beads. It's very effective, and it's partially very effective because the person was smart and made this on graph paper and made sure to use a ruler and really almost architecturally, like with architectural interior design text, used all caps, just make it very simple, right? This is a fabulous visual. It's a handout that you can use. You'd photocopy for each kid and they'd be good to go. Okay, but there's also no hypocrisy happening here. All right, so as we finish this off, take a look. Both of these visuals talk about 3D attachment techniques for paper. Okay. Now, admittedly, the one on the left was probably done during a demonstration, right? Sometimes that happens, right? You realize you need a visual. You've been showing the kids how to make these 3D attachments and you decide to just glue them all to the paper. But if you're going to make a permanent visual, right, which one of these two visually, in terms of its artistic ability, is more effective, right? The one on the right is cleaner and is more thoughtful in terms of how readable it is from a distance. Now, often the one on the left, that happens all the time. You realize you need a visual. Excuse me. You make the visual, and then I would probably go back, at the end of the week after I realized how useful this visual was, and I would probably make it again with a little bit more thought to something that's permanent, not something that emerged from my pedagogy. So will visuals emerge from your demonstrations? Absolutely. But if you find that you're referencing it a lot, it's time to make a permanent visual. All right, that's it on visuals for today. See you next time.